The UConn Huskies are your 2023 national champions, but where do they rank in our way too early top 10 for next season? Let's discuss.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college basketball show out there. I am your host, Andy Patton, joined by my fellow host, Isaac Shade, over there. We want to thank all of you for making Locked On College Basketball your first listen or first watch of the day as we descend into the off-season of college basketball. There are no more games until November. It is a sad, sad day talking about college hoops. But guess what? It's now the perfect time. To us, at least. Some of you may not think it's the perfect time. I think it's the perfect time to start looking ahead to the upcoming season and what we might see. Now, as we know, as we have discussed on this podcast, as many of you listening have realized through your own fandoms, I imagine, there is more roster turnover than ever before in college basketball, and that makes this process very, very difficult to figure out what teams are going to look like. How many, North Carolina, Gonzaga, Indiana, Kansas, I think all those teams have lost 3 or 4 different players. I think 5 for some of those teams already. We still haven't seen draft declarations for everybody yet. Certainly, there's still plenty of more movement to happen from the transfer portal perspective. But what we want to do is take a first look at what some of these rosters might look like next season and make our predictions for our top 10. So the way the show is going to work today, Isaac is going to give his top 10 in the first segment. We're going to discuss that. I'm going to give my top 10 in the second segment. We made these entirely separate from each other, so we do not know. We're going to learn for the first time what these top 10s look like for each of us. And then we're going to close out the show talking about some programs we maybe didn't discuss in the first 2 segments who might be on the rise this year, maybe some programs that we're a little concerned about at this point, at least in the off season. Good. Isaac, let's start with you. Let's hear what you think about this process, and also starting with who you have as the number 1 team in the 2023-2024 season at this point.
Yes, well, to timestamp it, because this thing can literally change by the minute. It is 7:40 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday, April 4th. So less than 24 hours after the national championship game. Here is my top 10, guaranteed to be dead wrong, and we can't wait for all of you to beat it up and tell us how wrong it is. Also, one quick other note, I live in Southwest Missouri. We stay down here, and there is potential severe weather in my area tonight, so hopefully the internet holds up and
fingers crossed
get through these 30 minutes. So I'm hearing wind right there. We'll see what happens. Stay with me, Andy. You just keep going if I'm gone, and that'll be great. So where does UConn fall? Man, they don't at all fall. They are my number 1 team ahead of next season, and part of this, yes, they could theoretically return their entire starting lineup. They're not going to. Jordan Hawkins is going to be gone. Joey Calcaterra, I know he's not a starter, but a key shooter off the bench, is out of eligibility, all 5 years of it, so not even that. But here's why. Adama Sanogo might and could leave. I don't think he's going to, Andy, in this NIL era. I think he's back, but even if not, it is the rise of Donovan Clingan, who is going to be even more of a force to be reckoned with his sophomore year. So again, though, don't rush Sanogo out the door. In the NIL era, we've already seen players superior to him stick around the next season. But even beyond that, because somebody's got to give them the ball. I don't know if you knew that, Andy. That's how it works for the sport.
It's true.
Will Tristan Newton come back for his 5th year? Why not? Naheem Aline, same thing for him. He's got a 5th year. Andre Jackson will be a senior with COVID eligibility. He could be back 2 more years. Alex Caravan will just be a sophomore. He started as a freshman. Plus, they add in some baller freshmen, Stephon Castle, Solomon Ball, Jalen Stewart, all top 75 in the class of 23. I don't see any reason to think that Dan Hurley's team is going anywhere. Plus, the Big East is going to be loaded again, so they'll be tried, true, and tested. Andy, am I dumb for putting the Huskies right back at the top of the heap?
You're not, and I'll certainly reveal my list when we get into it in the second segment. But I got UConn pretty darn high, too, for the same reasons as you. I think Sanogo, there's a very real possibility he returns. Drew Timme returned, Oscar Tshiebwe returned, Trace Jackson Davis returned, Hunter Dickinson is in the transfer portal, likely going to return to college as well. Like that player archetype, they're not all the same, but there are a lot of similarities in their respective styles of play, how it plays at the college level versus how it plays at the NBA level. And a lot of those players are making the decision to return to college. Makes a lot of sense for Sanogo to do the same. If he does, and they have Klingon and Sanogo back, and they get Tristan Newton back, really hard to not have this team at or near the very, very top.
Absolutely. You know that. Number 2, I'm going to give you my next 3, Andy, and then we'll see what you got to say after that. This is going to be a big surprise because, folks, I have been hard on this team. I've been out on this team. So I laugh as I say it because of that. I got the Purdue Boilermakers at number 2. Surprise, surprise. Mm-hmm. And here's why. Same thing as Adama Sanogo. I think Zach Edey comes back, the National Player of the Year. It's not far-fetched. Oscar Tshiebwe did it this year. Mm-hmm. And I know we've been hard on the freshman backcourt of Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer. Apologies to the Lawyer family. But guess what? They're going to be sophomores next year who are going to have gained a ton of experience. I expect Caleb First to be back. Here's the thing. For them to rise to this level, and also I should say the Matt Painter of it all, like he's a darn good basketball coach.
Absolutely.
But they need more shooting. That's got to be there. If they don't get that, Purdue would fall, but this is where I have them for now. Number 3, Kentucky. I think Oscar Tshiebwe might come back again. Why not, right? Like,
why not?
So all 3 of these teams at the top are all based on guys that 2 decades ago would have been top 5, top 10 picks, but now they're coming back to school because the NBA don't want them. We love them, and they can get paid. So let's do it. Might Antonio Reeves come back? What about CJ Frederick? And let's not forget this loaded freshman class of Justin Edwards, DJ Wagner, Aaron Bradshaw, and Rob Dillingham. And who knows what John Calipari, who's been leaning more heavily into the transfer portal, is going to do there. And Kentucky is obviously a desirable place. Andy, one more, and then I'll toss it to you. My number 4 team is the team that was a Lamont Butler shot away from heading to the national championship. Give me the FAU Owls, number 4 in my top 10. They can have literally everyone back except Michael Forrest, their 6th man. Like that starting 5, Brian Greenlee, Nick Boyd, Vlad Golden, the big Russian guy, and leading scorers in the backcourt, John L. Davis, and the electric Elijah Martin. And of course, we already know Dusty May's going to be back. Andy, why not? This team moves to the AAC along with half of the rest of Conference USA. Houston's leaving. I can see them just being right there at the top along with Memphis, right? North Texas has been strong, UAB, any of these squads. FAU ain't going anywhere, just like we said about San Diego State yesterday. I don't think San Diego State's top 10 good. I think Florida Atlantic will be again. The Owls.
I don't have Florida Atlantic in my top 10, but I think that they are fairly close, and I completely understand the logic here. A move to the AAC, it's a stronger conference, especially since they're bringing most of the strong Conference USA teams with them into the AAC. They don't get that chance to play Houston. That's kind of a bummer, but they'll get Memphis. They'll get the other strong teams in that conference, and I do think that this is a team that's absolutely going to compete, if not be the favorite, to win the AAC next season. But I wonder if that's necessarily enough for them. I mean, 4th is potentially putting them in the conversation to would they win other Power 5 conferences. I'm not sure that they're quite there, but I think this is a top 15 or so team. And I think that depending on how the rest of the offseason shakes out, they might be able to land a few high profile transfers, or at least transfers that'll help supplement the rest of the roster. Dusty May, extraordinary coach. I'm really excited about the future of this team.
All right, maybe I'm high on them, but why not? Let's
fly right?
with the Eagles, the Owls. What are Ewls? I don't know. 5, 6, and 7. At 5, I've got Arizona. Again, this is based on some returners. I really see a world in which both Tubelis and Umar Ballo are back next season, and Kirk Reese is gone. Andy, quite frankly, he's a little bit of a wild card for me, and I think that might be some addition by subtraction. Crucify me on that if folks want to, but that's where I'm at on it now. Obviously, if both Ballo and Tubelis are back, this ranking might be too low. If they're both gone for some reason or another, that's too high, obviously. Right. At 6th, I got the Duke Blue Devils. We already know that Tyrese Proctor and Mark Mitchell are back. We already knew that Whitehead was gone, and we found out just a couple hours ago that Derek Lively was leaving. We're waiting on Kyle Filipowski. Some Duke insiders have told me they think he might be back. I just don't see it, man. Like, you got to go if you're Kyle Filipowski. To me, I think the key for this is Jeremy Roach. If they can continue to have that Tyrese Proctor, Jeremy Roach backcourt, they're going to have a good season in Durham. And, of course, this is another team that brings in freshman studs. Mackenzie Mbako is a dude. Caleb Foster, Sean Stewart. But watch out also for TJ Power, who can do a little bit of everything at 6'8". And then 7th, I've got Marquette. They're another team that could basically bring back their entire starting 5, powered by All-American Tyler Kolek, who's just insane. They won the Big East regular season, that loaded top end of the Big East at least, and the conference tournament. I could see some regression for Marquette, so I'm going to be a little bit lower on them probably than a lot of folks, but I've got the Golden Eagles still there in the top 10.
I am not going to talk about Marquette and Duke because I have them pretty high on my top 10, so we'll get to them in the second segment. I was really close on Arizona. I just have a feeling they're not going to return both to Bellis and Ballo.
Yeah,
I think one of those guys is leaving, and I think that plus they're unsettled at point guard right now. If they land, Taron Armstrong from Cal Baptist, which has been rumored, if that happens by the time you're listening to this, because that's how fast things move, then I probably would put them back into my top 10, because I think even if it's Ballo and Taron Armstrong and Pelle Larsson and the rest of that kind of returning cast and whomever else they add, I think that that's probably a top 10 team. But right now, without knowing what's going on with both Tubelis and Ballo, I'm a little bit skeptical on them.
Yeah, that is 100% an okay thing to do. By the way, watch Pelle Larsson hit next year, and you were just 1 year too
I was just
early.
a year off. It happens.
Number 8 through 10 for me. Number 8, Michigan State. I know this team kind of flew under the radar for a lot of the season. I thought they were number 2 in terms of being a team right behind Purdue, even though they weren't right behind Purdue, but it kind of played out that way in the NCAA tournament. Tyson Walker can come back. This backcourt of AJ Hoggard and Jaden Akins should be back on the perimeter. We'll see. I know Matty Sissoko hasn't been awesome.
Yeah.
But I think he's been solid, and I expect him to take some steps. They got some really stud freshmen coming in, though. That's a big part of this for me, in Xavier Booker and Jeremy Fears, who are both top 20. And I would love to see Malik Hall come back next year. I think he got shorted a little bit because of injuries this season, and I think he is kind of an X factor for Tom Izzo, who, oh, by the way, is another part of this. It's the Tom Izzo factor. That helps me put them at 8. 9, Creighton. This is another one where it's all going to be based on draft decisions, chiefly Ryan Kalkbrenner and Baylor Shireman. If either or both of these guys are back, I feel good about this spot at 9. If they're both back, this is too low, I think, at 9. Big question what Arthur Kaluma does, but I expect them to have Ryan Nemhard back running the show, Trey Alexander, and then a guy coming in from Virginia who I really like, Isaac Trout, not spelled like the fish, but homophone. Is that right? Homophone? I don't know, whatever. And then at 10, I got the Kansas Jayhawks. A lot of this is, quite frankly, Bill Self. I trust Bill Self. Now, as you're watching this on Wednesday, there is a big Kansas press conference at 11 a.m. Eastern, I believe it is, on Wednesday. If Bill Self announces he's retiring because of health or anything like that, this changes this dynamic for me, and there's no way I have Kansas 10, because this is chiefly based on him, because Jalen Wilson will be gone. Grady Dick, whom, man, what a season as a freshman, will be gone. But I love DeJuan Harris as a guard. Ernest Uday took some big leaps forward. I think he can really help in the front court. I'm hopeful that Kevin McCullough and KJ Adams come back. I wouldn't be shocked if both of them aren't, though. And, of course, they've got some great freshmen coming in, Elmarco Jackson and Chris Johnson. And Kansas will make some noise in the transfer portal. So that rounds out my top 10. Really quick to run it back. UConn, Purdue, Kentucky, FAU, Arizona, Duke, Marquette, Michigan State, Creighton, and Kansas. Andy, that is a haul, and I know you got some differences than I do, and I cannot wait to chop it up, find out what's going on in your head. Let's do it in just a second. But first, this episode's brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and now's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. So download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. And then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and all that. Make sure you check out some of the lines of the NBA games coming up in the next couple days. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss your chance to get that no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets back when you go to FanDuel.com/locked on. Once again, that's FanDuel.com/locked on to learn all about it. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Andy Patton, are you with me? Do you have the national champion UConn Huskies, the 5th time they've done it in the last 24 tournaments? Are they your #1 team ahead of next season, at least right now on April 4th?
No, they are not. They are not my #1 team. We'll get to them momentarily. My #1 team is in the same conference.
Ooh.
I'm going with the Golden Eagles of Marquette. I have Marquette at my preseason, way too early preseason, I should say, #1 team. And for a lot of the same reasons you kind of talked about them being in your top 10, I think could in theory return all 5 of their starters. If Tyler Kolek is back, that's a huge advantage for them. Iguaro, if they get Omax Prosper back, again, I think there's a good chance that they return their entire starting 5. People love playing for Shaka Smart. I don't see any obvious candidates to be NBA players. I don't think, or at least NBA draft picks this year. I don't think we're going to see a big exodus of transfers. We haven't so far as we're recording this, at least. Marquette obviously has some stuff they have to work on the defensive end of the floor. And if they keep the same group, that is an area they need to improve, whether that's finding, defensive stoppers in the transfer portal that they can kind of plug in as rotation players, whether it's making some shifts to how they operate on the defensive end of the floor. There's some stuff that they need to work on, but right now I got Marquette #1, and I'm not going to tease it any longer. I got UConn #2. I got them right behind them. I got 2 Big East teams in the top 2, and I think there's a larger conversation to be had about the ridiculousness of what the Big East might look like next year. We could talk about that more in the final segment of the show and throughout the next few months of the offseason. But for me, UConn, it comes down to the same stuff you talked about. There's a very real possibility Sonogo returns. Even if he does not, Donovan Clingan is going to be an absolute monster at the collegiate level, unless they lose both those guys, which feels very unlikely to me. The Tristan Newton of it all is definitely a factor. If they lose him, I still think that Hurley's going to find a really good guard in the portal. I'm not saying they'll just easily replace Tristan Newton, plug and play, and be fine, but I think there's a chance that they can still have a really elite guard room with that front court. I think Marquette and UConn are the top 2 teams for me, and I think you could kind of organize it in a lot of different orders. But right now, the Big East and potentially the championship is going to run through those 2 schools.
This is something wild to me to think about, that it's not – I just said the word wild. I'm going to say it again. Wild to have 2 Big East teams top 2. Like it just the Big East, Big Monday lover in me loved this concept. And I mean, I don't want to go much further because obviously, as you said, we got to talk more about the Big East. But if you're a guard who could come, it's the easiest pitch in the world. Hey, you know that dude Adama Sonogo that just won the mop?
Right.
You know that guy that backed him up? His name's Donovan Clingan, who you can just throw lobs anywhere and he'll finish. Yeah, you get to throw to them all game long. Cool, I'm in, sign me up. Like it's the easiest pitch for Danny Hurley in the world. Andy, I love it. I'm so happy for Shaka Smart to have gotten out of Austin and found immediate success in back-to-back years at Marquette. Cannot wait to see what year 3 holds. Who do you got next? Who's number 3?
The next 2 teams I have are teams that you had in your top 10 as well. For number 3, I have Duke, who you had at 6. So we're both kind of in the same spot with them. I think the fact that they already committed to, or they already have the returning Tyrese Proctor and Mark Mitchell is so huge for them. We're not surprised that Dariq Whitehead and Derek Lively are out the door. We kind of expected that. The Filipowski of it all is a significant factor.
Yes, it is.
I am also hearing the same things you're hearing, that there's a possibility he returns. I am skeptical. I don't think it would, I don't want to say it would be a bad decision necessarily, but it would be a surprising decision. Let's put it that way. But if he returns, 6, where you have him at 6 is probably too low, and heck, where I have him at 3 might even be too low, to be perfectly honest.
So good.
Especially depending what we see with Jeremy Roach. That's kind of a fascinating one as well. And they got some high-profile freshmen coming in. I'd be shocked if they didn't add some high-profile players via the transfer portal as well. And then for me at 4, I have Kansas, another team that you had in your group. You had them 10th. I think the Bill Self of it all is absolutely not just a factor, a significant one. One of the most significant things that could happen. I have no indication that he is planning to step down or anything like that, but you got to worry about his health a little bit and wonder if there's what the announcement might be here coming from that program. But expect DeJuan Harris back, expect KJ Adams back. They have a top 5 recruiting class coming in. They have always been really good at supplementing via the transfer portal. Case in point, a player like Kevin McCullar for them. I expect them to do the same, and I think they're going to be in that top 5 conversation again next season. And then at number 5, this is the first team I have that you do not have on your top 10, and that's the Cougs, Houston Cougars. For me, I think Marcus Sasser moving on is obviously a tough one for them. We recently found out Tremont Mark has entered the transfer portal. That's a significant loss for them. He played really well in the NCAA tournament, but assuming Jamal Shed comes back, he's fantastic. He's an elite PG1 at this level, can facilitate an offense, lead a team really well, and he's continuing to get more experience, obviously. And Terrence Arsenault is a guy that I kind of mentioned as a potential breakout candidate in the NCAA tournament. He didn't quite do that, but I'm not out. I'm sticking with him.
That was opportunity because Sasser played more than we thought.
Yes, exactly. Sasser ended up not being all that hurt, and so that kind of helped them a lot. But I think Arsenault's primed to take a really big role. I expect them to supplement their team with some transfer portal additions as well. And I think Houston's going to be in their first year in the Big 12. I think they're going to be right in the conversation as one of the 10 and maybe 5 best teams in the country. Yep.
Interesting stuff with going back to Duke. That something neither of us mentioned is Ryan Young's coming back, who's a really high end offensive rebounder for him, unsung kind of helpful hero of this team. I think that'll be big, and I wouldn't be surprised to see John Shire take a leap forward after whatever he's learned this year in year one. As for Houston, why I don't have them is kind of the things that you said. I think are massive for me with Sasser gone, Tremont Mark gone. We fully expect Jarris Walker to be out the door. And he's just such a unique individual for that team. And I don't think it's going to be a massively steep learning curve getting into the Big 12. But it's going to be supremely more difficult than the AAC was. And I just, because of that, didn't have them in my top 10. But if we went out to 15, I would have absolutely had them there.
Yep, 100%. And for me, moving on, number 6, we're still talking about the Big East. We're still in the Big East. I have the Blue Jays.
Three Big East in your top 6.
I know, and I'll be honest with you. I originally typed him at 5, and I was like, I can't quite do it. I'm not quite there. Creighton again, a big part. It's the same kind of conversation with Marquette. In theory, the Blue Jays could return all 5 of their starters. Are they going to? I have no idea. It's hard to say. I expect Ryan Nembhard to be back, like you mentioned. Baylor Shireman and Ryan Kalkbrenner are kind of the big question marks for that team right now. Same with Trey Alexander as well, and Arthur Kaluma, what those guys are going to do. But it's a well-coached team. They were significantly better than the 6th seed that they earned in March. They displayed that by playing really well in that tournament. They still have their warts. They still have their flaws. I think Isaac Trout is going to help them with some of that stuff as well. So I got them in the top 6 right now, depending on how, of course, the offseason shakes out. And then at number 7, this is one that I didn't see on your list, the Razorbacks, the Hogs. Arkansas, and we just learned that Ricky Council has declared for the NBA draft. I believe that he did not specify whether he is going to get rid of his eligibility or not. I have them at 7, even with the assumption that Ricky Council is not returning. I believe he is going to go to the NBA. I believe he probably should go to the NBA with how he performed down the stretch for that team. But they also just added Keon Menafield from the University of Washington. This happened a few hours before we hit the record button here, so this is pretty new information. Menafield is a guy that I got to watch a handful of times at UW. He's very, very good, and I think he fits what Eric Musselman and the Hogs like to do. So is he as good as Ricky Council? No, but he is a very, very solid addition for this team. They also have Layden Blocker and Bay Fall, 2 top 30 freshmen coming into this team. We assume health for Brazil, and I think that this team could be right back in that conversation. They were a top 10 team last year, of course, did not live up to those expectations. They're losing a ton of talent with Nick Smith and Anthony Black out the door, but I'm pretty excited about what this Arkansas team can contribute. Number 8, heading out to the West Coast, Bruins of UCLA. For them, it's about the 2 freshmen. What's going to happen with Amari Bailey and Adem Bona? If both of those players return, I think UCLA has to be a top 10 team. You have to have them in the top 10. They have a top 15 recruiting class coming in. They have a lot of good veteran pieces around them. Jalen Clark not expected to be back until like December, which definitely hurts them in terms of like their non-conference schedule and everything going on there. But I think that they're a really, really solid team. And if they even return one of these 2 freshmen, that's going to put them in a really enviable position in a not very good final year of the Pac-12. Number 9, give me Jim Larrañaga and the Canes. Nigel Pack is expected to be back. The rest of that kind of backcourt is a bit more questionable. Are we going to see Isaiah Wong? Are we going to see Norchad Omier? Are we going to see Wooga Poplar? I expect Wooga to be back. I think Norchad's probably going to come back as well.
That'd be awesome.
They're going to need some transfers. The Canes are going to need, but guess what? They have a lot of money and they are not afraid to spend that money to bring in high-profile transfers. I don't see any reason why players would not want to go play for Jim Larrañaga and the Canes the way that they have done the last 2 years. Back-to-back Elite Eights tends to get you high-profile players in the portal. Back-to-back Elite Eights and a deep pocket tends to get you a lot of players in the transfer portal. So I think Miami is going to reload and have a really, really good roster next season. And there's a chance that we're going to look back in late October when we're putting together our preseason top 25, and 9 might even look low for the Canes. Yeah. Rounding it out, number 10, give me the Wildcats. John Calipari, not Northwestern. Sorry, Northwestern fans. Not even Kansas State. Sorry to them. give me the
That's dirty. Wildcats. That's dirty, Andy.
Well, you can't just say give me the Wildcats. There's like 40 of them. Like just about every team. My wife went to a Wildcats in Linfield and D3 school. I'm not putting them on there. Kentucky. The big question, of course, for them, like you said, with the return of Antonio Reeves, the return of CJ Frederick, are those guys coming back? They have the top recruiting class in the country at 24/7 Sports. It's kind of considered one of their weaker recruiting classes. Part of that is just that the high school classes these last few years are kind of questionable because of COVID-19 and everything that happened with that. So that's a big question mark for them. Of course, the other big question mark is the transfer portal additions. We've seen Cal try to be more active in the transfer portal. Some of those additions have worked very well. Some of them have not. So what kind of success he has in the portal is going to be a big factor. But I think Kentucky's got a real possibility of putting together a roster that's going to have them in or around the top 10 coming into the season.
Andy, I love this back 5. I love that we had quite a bit of a differentiation. There were of your top 10, I didn't have 4 of them: Houston, Arkansas, UCLA, Miami. But interestingly, those were all teams I had just in my outside looking in. So I think so much of it is because of the uncertainty that you talked about right off the top. Going back to Creighton, I really don't think Baylor Shireman should leave. I just don't. Who knows what NBA evaluation he'll get? I don't think he's ready personally, but I think he's a great player. I just don't think he's NBA ready yet. It was interesting that you had Arkansas and UCLA back to back, with both having significant injury, unfortunate things that happened this year, and hoping to get them back. And that's going to be a major factor, both with, as you said, Trayvon Brazile and Jalen Clark then for UCLA. And so that'll be a major storyline of if and when they get those guys back and how healthy they are and ready to go. And so really interested to see on that and what happens, man. In Miami, what an interesting story they will continue to be.
Well, there are a lot of fantastic teams not in my top 10. There are a lot of fantastic teams not in your top 10 who we expect to do really big things next year. We're going to tell you why we have some programs on the rise right after this. All right, Isaac, I want to talk about a few teams that maybe aren't in the top 10, maybe aren't in the top 15, maybe aren't even necessarily going to be in the top 25, but who so far, again, less than 48 hours after the NCAA tournament has ended, who seem like they're on the rise. I want to start talking about Colorado. I've seen a few preseason top 25s, or way too early top 25s, I should say, that have Colorado in the top 25 because they're expected to bring back 4 of their 5 starters. They also already added Eddie Lampkin via the transfer portal.
From the Wildcats.
They already added Eddie Lampkin. Cody Williams.
No, I'm just kidding. That's Horned Frogs. Man, I always get those stupid purple Big 12 teams. I mess
You know
it up,
what?
Andy.
You know what? It's fine. They're all Wildcats. Every school's Wildcats.
That's right.
Anyway, Colorado.
Tell me about the UCLA Wildcats, Andy. How'd they do this year? Yes. Okay. Good. Love it.
Colorado, in addition to adding Eddie Lampkin, they also added Cody Williams, top 10 player in that recruiting class, the younger brother of Jalen Williams, who is killing it for the Oklahoma City Thunder right now. After shout out WCC Hoops, he went to Santa Clara prior to that. And then I think we'll have a longer conversation about the Big East, without a doubt, in future episodes, probably as soon as this week. But Georgetown, St. John's, Villanova, all programs that seem to be on the rise. Georgetown, of course, hiring Ed Cooley away from Providence and getting some of Ed Cooley's top recruits and current players to follow him to DC.
Sorry,
and then
Providence.
St. John's.
Man, I feel so bad for the Providence Wildcats, Andy. That's a tough stuff.
Villanova, next team that I want to talk about. They're getting Justin Moore back. If Eric Dixon returns as well, Kyle Neptune it's a learning curve for him, but man, I feel confident about his ability to kind of right the ship for the Wildcats there at Villanova. And then St. John's can't bring Rick Pitino in and expect to not do well. I think they're going to see some good. Are they going to be a top 25 team? I would be surprised if either Georgetown or St. John's were there necessarily, but I wouldn't be shocked either.
Well, and Andy, on the ones that might go in the opposite direction, I'm first looking at the Indiana Wildcats. They're going to lose Trace Jackson Davis and Jalen Hutch. Well, we know actually earlier today, Trace Jackson Davis. So I say gonna. They are, and he said I'm in. So he's going to be gone. I'm sure Shafino is going to be out. He hasn't announced, has he? Did I miss that?
I don't believe he's announced, but yeah, I think.
Yeah, I mean he's going to be gone. And so what does Mike Woodson do next year? I mean, they got some other guys, and Indiana's always going to be solid. They're in the seems like top 2 for Caleb Love transferring from North Carolina, which,
yeah,
do you really want him or not? I don't know. You know, there's that whole conversation. And so I think they would take a downturn next year after losing those guys, and understandably so. Another is a lot of people, and this is going to have to be an off-season conversation, Andy, is the speculation around has the window passed for Gonzaga? I don't think so. I mean, maybe this like short view window has passed. I don't think the big picture window has passed, but the Drew Timme era, I think we can call it that at Gonzaga. He is worthy of having an era, the Drew Timme Wildcats. You know, like what does Gonzaga look like next year? We found out earlier today that Efton Reed is transferring out. Like Salas is gone. So Mark Few's got some retooling to do this offseason, but it's another place where sign me up, man. I want to go. I want to play for Mark Few. And what happens with Julian Strother and Malachi Smith, like all these guys. So it'll be interesting next year. Andy, very quickly on the way out, there's a couple teams that we both left out of our top 10 that I've seen in some other people's top 10s. That would be the Tennessee Volunteers and the Baylor Bears. And I think that's defensible. I could see both of them being fringe top 10 teams, but I feel confident in that decision for Baylor. I mean, Keontae George will be gone or is gone. LJ Cryer's in the transfer portal. Adam Flagler could come back, and that would be massive. And probably having a healthier JTT back next season. So that's good. And obviously some good recruits coming in. So wouldn't be surprised to see them right back. But as of now, I wouldn't have them in the top 10.
Yeah. And I'm with you on that. And as well as with Tennessee, I think a team that they just have, there's so much uncertainty right now. What's going to happen with Josiah Jordan-James? What's going to happen with Plavsic? Let's try that again. What's going to happen with Santiago Vescovi? Like we're expecting Zakai Ziegler to be back and healthy, but again, when is he back? When is he at 100%? Like there's a lot of questions about Tennessee right now. I think that they have a chance to be a very, very, very good team next year, but it's just, they're a little bit too far gone right now for me to know exactly what they're going to look like next year. Once we get a better picture, very real chance they're in that top 10 by the start of the season.
Yeah. And a Rick Barnes team is always going to defend so well. And one thing though we didn't say is Olivier Kamwa is in the transfer portal. That's a big hit to them. But Julian Phillips, who had a really solid freshman year, I'm curious to see if he returns for Tennessee. That would be big for them. Well, Andy, it's weird to do a show knowing that there's no college basketball coming up in the near future. So wild. But man, it's going to be a fun offseason. All sorts of great stuff, as we've talked about. Transfers, declarations to NBA draft, anything under the sun. We're going to be talking about it. Some fun lists just like this. And you need to be here for it. We want to hear your top 10s. Let us know who you think right now is top 10 or just outside of it. Let us know in the comments on the YouTube Wildcats, man. That's the official mascot of YouTube. Folks, thanks so much for tuning in. Please don't forget to subscribe to the show, smash the like button, and leave a comment. We'll be right back with you tomorrow. Until then, apologies to the lawyer family. Go Wildcats, and peace.